Hello and welcome to Dice and Demons. I'm Emma, and in this video I want to show you how I paint this Lord Arcana from the new Stormcast range from the Dominion box. And I have been talking a little bit about painting the new Stormcast models in my previous video, where I was explaining how I tried to come up with a color scheme that didn't really work, and then I got some really constructive feedback from my friend Casper, who is the co-owner of the Friendly Local Game Store. And I eventually ended up with this color scheme you can see here, and in this video I want to show you how I painted it. But I just want to quickly, before I get into the tutorial, I want to address the decisions that went into ending up with this specific color scheme. Because I get a lot of questions from people asking me, so Emma, how do you choose your color schemes? How do you know what will work out? And my answer is usually, well, I don't really, I just try stuff out. And that was my approach also with the Stormcast models. And I had this idea that I wanted to do something where I had it going all the way from a black through red, orange, up to a bright yellow. Because I really like that sort of dark, flamey look that ends up with a really bright color. And I just really wanted to incorporate that into my Stormcast color scheme. At the same time, I wanted to have some really bright colors. I wanted, I really like the turquoise. I really like the bright green. I really like the neon pink, of course. And I wanted all that in one model. And I tried it out. And you can see the model here. And I never finished it because for some reason I just wasn't feeling it. I wasn't happy with it, and so eventually I got into the game store and I spoke with Casper, and he suggested that instead of the black through red, orange to yellow, I should perhaps try something like going from blue to pink, but in sort of a smaller scale. So instead of going from black to yellow across the entire model, then just going a blue to pink on smaller armor panels. And I really, really like that idea. That was a really cool idea, so I tried it out. And I have to say, I am much, much happier with the final result than I would have been if I had decided to stick with my black, red, yellow scheme. That's not to say I don't like the idea of the black, red, yellow, because I really, really do. It was definitely, the saying "kill your darlings." That was definitely it because I really liked that idea. It just wasn't working out. I'm not sure if it wasn't working out because I tried to do a shade across the entire model, or if it wasn't working out because of the bright colors. And I'm not saying it would have been an awful model if I decided to stay with it, but I definitely think that the new color scheme works better overall. So that is, that is at least sometimes also one of the ways I work out a color scheme. I try stuff out. I decide, I'm not completely happy with it. Then I try to convince myself, oh, it's fine. And then someone will tell me, are you sure about this? And I will admit to myself, no, I'm not really sure about this, and then I will redo it. So that's as I usually say. I mean, if you really, really dislike something you've done, strip the model and try again. It's not the end of the world, and you will hopefully have learned something in the process. So enough of me rambling about that. Now let's get to the tutorial. So I start out with a model that's been primed using the Wraithbone spray, and then I take the contrast paint Talazar Blue. It's one of those contrast paints that I actually really like when I use it, but I don't know, I often forget that I have it and that I really like it, so it just sits on the shelf. I also take another contrast paint. This is Volupus Pink, and I mix that, as you can see, with the blue. It's just a really quick wet blend, very, very easy to do. And I'm not too bothered if it isn't quite as smooth in the transitions as you might like, because I'll be covering the entire thing with texture anyway, so it doesn't really matter too much. So I just try to see if I can blend it real quick. And I also really like the sort of purplish shade that I have in the middle of the blend. Then I take another contrast paint, Yandan Yellow, my all-time favorite yellow, and I take Gryph-hound Orange, also contrast paint, and then I try to do the same thing with a quick wet blend. It's a little bit more important to me here on the cape because it's such a large surface. So even if I'm covering the entire surface with the textures later on, if it is really splotchy and not quite smooth, it'll be easier to see. It's not something I want to stress over too much, but I try to be a little bit more careful here and work a little bit faster as well. That's of course always the trick with wet blending. You have to be a little bit fast, and I try to avoid that the paints pool too much. But it's not something that I will spend a huge amount of time worrying about. But just I try to be a little bit careful, and I do the same here on the sleeves with just a really quick wet blend. On the inside of the cape, I have decided to go with a turquoise. I actually tried out on another sort of a test model. I tried out a bone color or a beige, and I think it didn't really work out as well as I would have liked. So I decided to go with turquoise. And I mean, turquoise is a much more fun color anyway, so I'm happy with that decision. I decided to use that on her staff as well because it's meant to be sort of magical energy, I think, and I wanted something that looked a little bit magical but at the same time matched the rest of the color scheme. And so for shading the inside of the cloak, I am using the contrast paint Achillean Green, and as you can see here, I'm using a quite small fine brush, and then I just do really fine cross hatching. I'm not too careful with it on the inside of the cloak because that won't be as visible, but you can see here on the top of the staff that I'm trying to be a little bit more careful and get some really tiny cross hatching going on here. And I think contrast paints are just so easy to work with for this kind of thing because they flow so smoothly. Then for the cape, the outside of the cape, I am using the contrast paint Snakebite Leather to put a lot of nice contrasts on the especially the orange, but also the yellow parts. And some of, as you can see, some of it just was a little bit heavy-handed, but I will touch that up later when I get to the highlighting. So it's not a big deal. It's not something I'm going to fuss over too much. Then for the blue and pink armor plates, I use Pterodon Turquoise, another contrast paint. I think you will see a pattern forming here if you haven't been to this channel before, but if you have, you are definitely not surprised. And as you can see, I'm using more or less the same brush for all of this, also for doing the sort of dark edge highlight, as you can see here on the top of the armor plate. And this is a brush I've got from Green Stuff World. I think it's a size 0 or 00, I'm not quite sure. What I really like about this for the cross hatching is that it's got a really fine tip, while at the same time it's a little bit longer than a lot of other brushes that are as fine, which means that it can hold just a little bit more moisture, and so it doesn't dry out as quickly. For the first layer of highlighting on the blue, I use Vallejo's Light Sea Blue. It's an air color, and it has I think it works really well. It's very smooth and goes on really easily. It's a little bit tricky to see here, but for the first highlights on the pink, I use a mixture of a tiny bit of white and then a neon pigment from a Green Stuff World called Magenta. And it has this really nice vibrant pink. It's the first time I'm using it like this. Usually I go for a lighter pink first, but I decided that I wanted to give it just one more layer. And here I have it's the same mix with the magenta pigment and white, but just with more white added to do another brighter highlight. I try to be careful when I do pink so that I don't make it look like it's just like sort of a My Little Pony style pink, but something that's really bright and vibrant. So try not to go in too much with the white. At the same time, I wanted to really make sure that you can see where the highlights are. So it's always a balancing act. Then for the final highlight here, I used pure white. This is matte white from the Army Painter. and I use that both on the pink and on the blue, and also as an edge highlight. And I love doing this step of the painting process because it makes everything pop. Yeah, again, you have to be a little bit careful with it, just to make sure that you don't end up with a model that looks really pale. But still, I don't know. It makes me so happy every single time I do this, because I think, oh, now I can see where I'm going with this. So yeah, this is for me at least the most fun part. Next up, I go over the cloak, and I am using an orange for this, just a plain orange I've got from somewhere. I don't even remember which name, just orange. And as you can see, I tried to just fix where I was a little bit heavy-handed, as I said, with the first layer of texture. And it works just fine. No one will ever notice. Well, now you probably will, because I told you. And then when I'm happy with the orange, I go over most of the cape using a yellow. This is Flash Kids yellow. And oftentimes I would just apply that on the yellow parts, but I've decided that I want the cape to be blended pretty well. So that's why I've decided to also use it on the orange parts to make sure that it all sort of fits together. Here I'm more interested in a sort of cohesive look than really sharp contrast, because I do have the very sharp contrasts on the armor plates. So it doesn't have to be quite as distinct, I think, on the cloak. And then lastly, I go over it with a bit of Wraithbone, also using the cross hatching. And this I predominantly apply to the yellow areas where I think you would have some lighter surfaces. And again, this is the part of the process that makes me the happiest, because then now I can see where I'm going with it, and it turns out it worked out fine. Then as a highlight for the staff, I use a bit of mood green, and I try to be, again, really careful with it here, because this is a really tiny surface, and I do want to use the cross hatching to make sure that it doesn't stand out too much from the rest of the model, while at the same time not going overboard with it. I also use that same color as an edge highlight on the cloak, and I use it to do highlights on the inside of the cloak as well. Then I want to do an even brighter highlight on the green, and for that I am using a mixture of a pigment also from Green Stuff World called Neon Yellow, and mixed with Tesseract Glow from Citadel. And I use these as not the final highlight, but almost. And this is just a really bright green that makes me so happy every single time I use it, which means that I pretty much use it on every single project I have. It's a bit silly, I know, but it makes me so happy, which is, after all, the purpose of the hobby, right? For a final highlight on the green, I use a little bit of Flash Kids yellow, and again, I try to be a little bit careful not to go overboard with it, because I want to make sure that it looks like it's a turquoise and green with just a final highlight to make it pop, and not something that's yellow with a slight touch of green and turquoise. I also like that the yellow is the same yellow I used as a highlight on the cloak, which I think helps sort of create a link between those two colors. And here you can see the finished model. As I said, I'm really happy with the final result. I wasn't quite feeling the original color scheme, as I said, and this color scheme, I mean, for me at least, it just works out. It makes me really happy, and I also think it has the added benefit of not being too far off from my Seraphon, because I imagine that I can do sort of an army where I use the Stormcast as allies for my Seraphon, which would be really nice. So I wanted something that wasn't exactly the same, but at the same time would make sure that they kind of fit in at least. So I am really curious to see and hear from you what you think. Do you like this color scheme? Did you like the original one better? Let me know in the comments below, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you think. And of course, if you like this video, I would like it a lot if you would consider subscribing to my channel or liking the video. You can also follow me as Dyson Demons on Twitter and Instagram, and if you have some models of your own you want to show off or get some constructive feedback on, you can join me at the Dyson Demons showroom on Facebook as well. It's a really nice friendly little community we've got going on there, I think. So thank you so much for watching this one, and I will see you next time. Bye.